It has been proven over and over again. There's other ways to do this to make sure that the barriers to rise up aren't a ceiling that is a concrete ceiling. We need to tear it down so that we create more people. Here's the deal. If you're born poor in America today, this extraordinary country, you're more likely to stay poor than any time in modern history. And if you're born rich, you're more likely to stay wealthy as well. We need to get back to the more dynamic America where people have a chance to rise. You know, and if they stop making income, they go down. But this permanency of wealth and the permanency of poverty is not how America works.
I want to remind you that to get the questions in, because we'll be going through the audience questions real quick here. Changing the topic a bit, but not too much. U.S. Hispanics are a young population that care deeply about the future and worry about the growing federal debt and the broken tax code. Over the course of the Obama administration, the federal debt has grown by nearly $8 trillion. Now, to be fair, that's on top of the $10 trillion that was already there when he inherited the office. How can we balance the need to cut taxes with the need to pay down the debt without forcing a government shutdown and keeping the spending?
Well, I don't think we should shut down the government. That creates more cost for government, actually. And I don't think we should default on the debt. These are times where you can negotiate and create an environment where you can have some reforms that deal with the longer term issues, and I think that's more than fair. But ultimately, the United States should not default on its debt. That is an unserious act that would create real problems for our economy. So what do we do? I'm going to sound like a broken record. High sustained economic growth is the best way to create revenue for the government. The most exotic forms of taxation don't create the same kind of revenue for government as higher growth. It's check the record. If you're nerdy enough, go look at the federal budget, look at and match it with the economic growth, and you'll see what I'm saying. There's a lag, a leading effect that economic growth creates revenue in the out years, but it certainly doesn't. So creating a strategy of high growth has to be part of that. Curbing spending where it is the most dramatic. And again, this last week, the federal government spending was announced. Everybody was celebrating in the White House a $450 billion budget deficit, which was $30 or $40 billion less than the previous year. It was the marching bands, huge celebration. Well, that's not too hot. And the reason why we had that, even though there was a surge in revenue, like a 4% growth, I believe, in revenue, is that spending went up by 5.8%. And why did spending go up by 5.8%? Because Medicaid grew by double digits because of Obamacare. And Medicare is growing at a far faster rate than anything else. You've got to preserve and protect these programs for those that receive it today, but reform it so it doesn't overwhelm everything else. And the next president's going to have the courage to challenge the orthodoxy of Washington to begin to forge consensus to solve those two big problems that are going to overwhelm every other aspect of the budget.
Repeating arguments commonly used by big labor. Some express skepticism about the Trans-Pacific Partnership, suggesting that American wages, employment, and prosperity could take a hit. On the other hand, supporters of free markets agree that protectionism actually hurts the economy. One, do you support TPP, and what are the steps that policymakers take to make America more competitive in an increasingly global economy?
So I generally support with free trade as long as it's fair and that the protections in the agreement are there for American businesses that are unfairly treated. The reason for that is that most countries have higher tariff and non-tariff barriers than we do. So any trading agreement will create disproportionate benefits for us as long as it's enforced. I haven't read this agreement. In fact, I don't think anybody has read it. It hasn't come. We haven't received it. So, that's my big caveat. I haven't seen the agreement. But particularly in these countries in Asia that have non-tariff barriers that make it hard for entry for any country, if they are lowering their barriers, as has been written about at least, that's a huge win. It's a win for American agriculture, it's a win for American technology, it's a win for American services, and it can be a win for American industrial might. If we fix how we regulate and tax, we can outcompete anybody. But I haven't seen the agreement, and I don't know what the enforcement mechanisms are, but clearly we're living in a global economy. And those that want to create walls, physical walls and walls in general are not dealing with reality. The simple fact is, in dealing with, we're going to create a 25% tariff on cars made by Ford Motor Company, a U.S.-based company that also is expanding its operations, building cars and trucks here in the United States. Who wins on that? Certainly it's not the Ford workers in the United States. It's not. This is a lose-lose. In a free trading society, in a global economy, what we need to do is make sure that we're competitive and make sure that unfair trading practices are vigorously enforced, that we fight hard. If there's cybersecurity issues, stealing, espionage, stealing private property, intelligence, information, intellectual property, then we should use the trading mechanisms to fight against that. We should be much more aggressive in using these rules of engagement so that we protect American industry. And I think we'll not just leverage. If people are cheating, then it's not free trade. It's unfair trade. And that's the challenge is you're going to create a free trade environment, but then be vigilant to make sure that it's fair for American workers.
So I'll go through the questions from the audience, and the first one from Carlos is, Mr. Bush, I believe illegal immigration is a symptom. What do you think is the real disease, and what would you do to cure it? And as sort of a follow-up question to that, do you agree with the direction that this administration has taken with our relationship to Latin America?
What relationship?
Right.
I mean, I think that it's hard to tell that there's much of we're not engaged in Latin America. We should be a counter to China's mercantilist efforts in Latin America. We have major cultural and trading and economic and geopolitical benefits by doing so, and we should be fully engaged. I'm kind of special interest in this, I guess, from family, but more equally important. I lived in Venezuela when I was 24 years old for 2 years with my wife and 2 kids. I live in Miami, which is got one foot firmly planted in the United States and one that's kind of in the Caribbean and Latin America. I can see the benefits of a stronger U.S. relationship, one of mutual respect that will create economic opportunities for us, for sure, and certainly create growth for Latin America. If you look at the Northern Triangle countries that are suffering right now because of high crime and the gang problems and the drug problems, Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala, the majority of people that are coming to this country across our border in Mexico are coming from those countries, not from Mexico. In fact, I think Mexico migration may be at a net withdrawal right now. But we need to create what we did in Colombia when my brother was president. The Proyecto Plan Colombiano was a huge success. It created security. It created economic reforms that Uribe implemented. Colombia's had high sustained economic growth. Poverty has not been eradicated, but it has been limited. And it's much more peaceful because the United States played a partnership role with Colombia. We could do the same, I think, in Honduras and Guatemala and El Salvador. It would lessen the people that are being pushed out of the country seeking safety in our own country, and it would lessen the debate on immigration. That's engagement. And we don't seem to have the capability of doing that. The president has recently proposed a version of what I just described, and I think that's good, and we should be creating kind of a much broader consensus about the role of the United States in Latin America.
Regrettably, Venezuela looks like its economy is collapsing. Bolivia is headed towards Argentina.
Here's a problem in American foreign policy. If you have an election, then you check the box of democracy and you don't. That's it. Well, in the case of Venezuela, it's possible that Chavez got elected with popular vote. There's some belief that maybe he cheated a bit. But let's give him the benefit of the doubt his first time that he did it right. Then he steals freedom. He obliterates the democratic institutions. He politicizes the judiciary. He and his successor Maduro imprison people that disagree. They've consolidated power in every way, and it is a failed state. It is collapsing. I think the United States should view democracy as most people study this in a broader way. Democracy is not just elections, it's also respect for the rule of law. It's a respect for private property. It's a respect for the independence of the judiciary. It's respect for people that may not agree with you, that you shouldn't be in prison.
Sounds like economic freedom.
It completely sounds like political and economic freedom. That's democracy, that's freedom, that's liberty. And I think our State Department has a mindset that all you gotta do is get elected, and then we can't engage anymore, that somehow we're intervening in the affairs of a country. We can stand for the people that want freedom in the world. We can be for that. We have been in the past, I think we need to again, and Latin America is a good place to start.
As a dad, the most important thing I do is take my daughter to school. Why are so many hesitant to let me have a bigger say in what she does?
Good schools don't have barriers for parents. I did something, when I was governor, I created a BHAG, it's called, a Big, Hairy, Audacious Goal. I read it from Good to Great, Jim Collins' book. It's the only acronym that I actually enjoyed when I was governor. I tried to eradicate acronyms, I totally failed. But this one I thought was important. It was to create big aspirational goals. And our aspirational goal was to have 200,000 mentors in relationships in schools with a focus on struggling readers in third grade. Because if you can't read by the end of third grade, in fourth grade you're reading to learn, you're not learning to read. And you can't, how do you do math if you can't read? How do you do science? How do you do social studies? So this was a huge objective. And what I found was a lot of schools were resistant to having moms and dads and volunteers come into the schools. So I just got a big club out, banged the club down, and took away some of the stupid rules that some of the school districts had to encourage a more open system. And there's got to be some protections in schools, but you should not be prohibited from being actively engaged in your child's education. Technology is a way to do this. But I think it's really important. And by the way, we got to 200,000 kids having mentoring relationships with teenagers and adults. And it was one of the reasons why we had the greatest gains in early literacy reading. I mean, we are lights out. Florida was 29th out of 31 states in the fourth grade NAEP test. And in 10 years' time, big fight, we went to 6 out of 50. And low-income Hispanic kids do better than the California average. I think they do better than the Nevada average as well on that fourth grade test. The notion that somehow kids in poverty can't learn, just blow it up. There should be a 15-yard penalty, loss of down. There should be fines, whatever your favorite means by which to shatter that orthodoxy, because it's dangerous to assume that kids can't learn. It is extraordinarily dangerous in the world that we're in. We should assume that God has given every child the talent, that everybody has God-given abilities. Absolutely. We need to maximize it. Absolutely.
Teresa says, what is your opinion on the gender wage gap, and how do you plan on addressing the economic inequality women face?
So if a woman has a like-kind job, a similar job than a man, and is paid 75 cents or 76 cents, which is the common statistics I hear, there are laws that clearly mean that that's discrimination. And they should be enforced. They should be enforced vigorously. No questions asked. That should be the fact. And then we should create high economic growth to make sure that younger women have a chance to rise up as well. I did that when I was governor of Florida. In Florida, women's income grew 3 times faster than the national average because we had a growing economy. And so if you're first emerging into the workforce without growth, you're not going to get that first run. That's just a simple fact. And so as women have entered aggressively into the workforce, they're the last in some cases, and that's why that wage disparity exists. The laws exist, they should be enforced, but we should create a climate where people have a chance to rise up, and women will be the beneficiaries of more than men.